Hello everyone and welcome to the very first Breaking Barriers webinar from the PGMOL. This session is part of the organisation's wider work around equality, diversity and inclusion, and this is the first in a series of webinars taking place between now and the end of the season. Welcome along. My name is Mark McAdam and I'm genuinely delighted to be your host today. You'll be able to see our other special guests in the boxes beside me. But before I introduce them, let's speak to the PGMOL's MD, Mike Riley, who's going to say a few quick words of welcome. Mike, great to see you. Welcome along.
Thanks very much, Mark. And a really warm welcome to all of you who've given up your time this evening to join us for the first in our exciting new series, Breaking Barriers. I'd particularly like to thank both Howard and Sam for agreeing to share their very different but equally valuable and interesting experience of refereeing with us tonight. And thank Mark, who's got the enviable job of shaping tonight's debate. 3 years ago, we set out on a mission to make PGMOL an organisation in which everyone was welcomed and everyone's contribution is valued and respected. We can't disguise the fact that today our match officials, and to a lesser extent our staff, are not representative of our communities. But we want that to change. We want everyone to have the opportunity of walking out to officiate at Old Trafford or Anfield, or in Howard's case, the New York Stadium, knowing that you all have the support of your colleagues and that all of us in PGMOL will do everything that we can to make that ambition a reality. To help us to achieve our overall ambition, I am really grateful to the work of the talented and the passionate people who make up our Inclusiveness Advisory Group. The IAG's goal is to put equality, diversity and inclusion at the heart of everything that we do, to listen to our communities and to make sure that step by step our people are reflective of all of our communities. And tonight is a significant step forward for us in achieving that ambition. It's a chance to hear from two people with their own very unique journeys in the refereeing profession, who hopefully will underline the fact that refereeing really is for all of you. I really hope that you enjoy this evening. I hope that you spread the word and that you join us again next week. And now for the main event, and back to Mark.
Thanks very much, Mike. Great to see you and get a sense of the PGMOL's ambition for a more diverse profession and the level of commitment from the very top of the organisation led by yourself. You're looking rather different to the last time I saw you, which was a few years ago at Watford Football Club on a very, very early morning where you were wearing lycra.
Yeah, it was a very painful day as well, but in a worthwhile cause.
And just to quantify, Mike Riley was dressed in lycra because he was cycling around all 20 Premier League clubs with a number of other Premier League referees raising money for charity. There's no exclusive early on in the webinar. Right, let's get on to our special guests. Howard Webb is a referee that is recognised around the world and, let's be honest, a legendary figure here in England. He's taken charge of a World Cup final, a Champions League final and a whole host of other huge occasions. He's now leading the way in the USA as head of referees over in America, and most importantly, he's been a part of FIFA's work on fighting racism and discrimination in the game, and it's a genuine honour to introduce Howard Webb. Great to see you, Howard.
Hi, Mark. Good afternoon from Jersey City, New Jersey. Pretty snowy and cold, but delighted to be a part of this. Thank you to Mike and the PGMOL for asking me to be involved. I jumped at the chance.
And he genuinely has as well. Looking forward to hearing some of your stories in the next hour or so. Now, on to our second special guest. That's right, we've got two of them. This is a man who's currently refereeing in the EFL. Away from the pitch, he's highly committed to diversify both refereeing and also the firefighting services, which is including his role in EDI. He was recently named on the Football Blacklist, which is an initiative recognising the most influential people in the world of football. I'm also told, reliably informed as well, that he played against some very decent players back in his playing days. It's a big warm welcome to Sam Allison.
Thanks, Mark. The introduction's fantastic. For me, it's great to be on the platform with the likes of Howard Webb and yourself. It's just an honour to be involved. So I'm really privileged to be invited. In regards to the initiatives of breaking barriers and making a difference, for me, that's what it's all about. And no, it's fantastic to be involved. So I'm really grateful for Leon and the people who put this all together, and obviously the PGMOL and the FA that driving the change.
And we're delighted to have you involved as well. And you're on brand, so Mike Riley will be happy with that. And at this juncture, I'd like to just introduce myself. I'm a presenter and reporter at Sky Sports, and I'm one of the few out and proud gay men working in the football and sports industry. So within the session today, I'm hoping to looking to share some of my experience and my insight into breaking barriers to get into Sky Sports, and of course to this big webinar today. And because I'm in the company of referees, I promise I will be on my very best behaviour. Now, throughout the course of the next hour on this webinar, we'll be taking questions that have been sent in advance of this. So we'll be getting to a nice Q&A at the end of the session, as well as a whole host of questions that we've lined up ourselves. So we'll get straight to it. Let's start with Howard. And this is probably the question you get asked most of all. Howard, why would you be a referee?
That's a really good question, isn't it? And I've often thought that myself at times when I've made a few mistakes, which I've made a few in my career. But you know, looking back, it really was the best decision of my life to take up the whistle. Don't get me wrong. When I was 7 or 8 years of age, I didn't harbour any ambition to ref. At that age, I wanted to be a World Cup winning captain. I guess not realising at the age of 7 or 8 how difficult that ambition would be to achieve being an Englishman, but that's what I wanted to be at that age. And I tried hard. You know, I was a pretty average footballer, a central defender who didn't like heading the ball. And at the age of about 15, it became pretty obvious I wasn't going to make the grade. But all that time, my dad, who's still around and still involved in officiating, even in his late 70s, he said to me, Howard, he said, "You're not a very good footballer." I said, "Thanks, Dad." He said, have you thought about doing a bit of refereeing? He said, "You're a big guy, you know, you like the game. I think you might be okay at it." And I said, "Dad, I'm not really interested, because when I think about referees in my mind's eye, I think about bald old men," which is what I've become later down the line, and so was Mike Riley. But you know, at the time I was a young kid, and there weren't many young referees around at the time. And I remember thinking, you know, it might be quite interesting to have a young referee. Look how far we've come over the years. We have a lot of good young referees these days. But at the time, it was pretty unusual. So I decided to go and take a course, a 6-week course that culminated with an examination. I'd never, ever blown the whistle on the field, but I passed an examination which gave me a license to go out and referee games in the Rotherham and District local junior leagues. It was a bit like being given a driving license, having just read the highway code but never sat behind the wheel of a car. But I passed that exam on the 19th of December 1989. That was the day I passed the exam. And when I look back to that night, I suppose it was inevitable that somebody was going to go on to take charge of the World Cup final in 2010. That game was going to happen. It was going to have a referee, and it turned out to be me. I mean, unbelievable things happen when you take that move into refereeing. You very quickly get hooked into it. It's a challenge every single game, but with that challenge comes great satisfaction, and it can lead to some unbelievable things for pretty regular people like me, and that's what happened. So yeah, I fell into it because I wasn't a great footballer, encouraged by my dad, and looking back, it was a great start to an amazing journey with some incredible stops on the way.
Brilliant to hear. So let's go from a not so great footballer to someone I'm told was a very good footballer. Sam Allison, we'll ask the same question to you, because when you look at your journey, your background, you played the game. Why did you want to take that big step into the shoes of being a referee?
I didn't. Initially, it was a case of, what can I do next? So unfortunately, I didn't reach the levels I wanted to as a footballer through my own fault of believing in my own hype and thinking that I'd made it before I had. So I made mistakes in that domain, and I sort of got to a level of playing high semi-professional football, and I got to the age of 31, and the lights were starting to dawn and the curtains were coming down, thinking, what am I going to do next? So I did my coaching badges. I'd done half of my A license. So I'd done my UEFA B license. And I was talking to my manager at the time, who was Adrian Mings, which is Tyrone Mings' dad. And I thought about going into management. And I said, what's your thoughts? And he said, well, having a young family, it's probably not the best thing to go into. So I sort of scanned the footballing arena in regards to coaching and managing. And I didn't see many people who look like me. And I thought, so what do I take a chance? Am I in control of my own destiny going into management or coaching? Because normally if a manager gets the sack, the whole coaching staff go with them. And I looked at it and I thought, if players like Sol Campbell and Thierry Henry and all the big Vieira icons in football in the Premier League couldn't make a statement in the game in the Premier League, who do I think I am to think that I can get to that level when I've never even done anything on those sort of levels? So I thought, okay, not coaching. I want to try and get to a decent level in whatever domain I go into. So my secretary at the time at Chippenham Town Football Club was a guy called George McCaffrey, and he suggested to me, and it sounded like he was swearing, because he said, have you thought about doing refereeing? And I looked at him as if to say, you're having no, I've never thought about it. And it wasn't until 2 weeks later, I was on the course. It was February 2011. And he said, I'll look after you. And I said, okay. So 2 weeks later, I was on the course. And then since that day, I've just had that support, and it's just been on the upward movement. And I wish I'd started earlier.
Sam, it's clear that more work needs to be done to diversify the refereeing world. Was there a thought process from yourself that this isn't the right place for a black man to go, or did you just feel that this was the opportunity and this felt right for you?
A combination of both. I think it was a case of, especially family, relatives and friends were like, why are you doing that? Because there was an image or a perception of what a referee looked like, and it didn't look like me. And I didn't even really see Uriah Rennie, because in those days, when I was watching football matches back in the 90s and the 2000s, it would have been Uriah Rennie that of anyone who would have looked like me. And I'm a strong believer, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And there was a lot of, why would you do that? Because referees are hated. People hate referees. You're going to get stick. 50% of the supporters don't like you. Managers don't. And and then you're a black man on top of it. And there's no one who looks like who you're going to talk to when things are difficult. So there was an element of, why am I doing this? Also, for me, it was a case of, I want to make a difference. And I saw it as a challenge. And it gave me that little bit of a fire in my belly to break barriers and to try and make a difference. And I thought, with my playing experience and my coaching mindset and my mental toughness, I thought, actually, no, I'm going to make it successful. And I think with using all those attributes at the same time, I thought I was in more of my own control of my own destiny, with the support along the way that I've had from many, many colleagues within the refereeing fraternity.
Howard, we've touched upon some of the huge games that you've had the pleasure of refereeing and being, the man making the decisions in World Cup finals. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome yourself personally?
I think obviously some of my challenges are different to the ones that Sam would have faced. And congratulations, Sam, on your recent promotion to the Football League. I remember thinking, that was the kind of the key promotion for me, was making it onto the Football League, the place where I'd seen so many of my childhood heroes, standing on the terraces watching the game, and then suddenly you're involved and you've kind of like, you've got the best seat in the house for something that really matters. Matters to all of those fans in the stadium, and that game has been given to you. The responsibility of controlling that game has been given to you. So it's a great buzz, isn't it, when you stand in that tunnel at 5-3 and you walk out and take charge of something that means so much to so many people. So fantastic that you've been so successful, Sam, and long may that continue. And the more people we've got involved in the game, we've got an understanding for the game, a true understanding of the game, understanding of people, and can bring that together. It's a good recipe to be successful. But some of the challenges that I faced were really different. I mean, there were lots of referees that looked like me on the field. I mean, there were bold back then as well. But So I guess a lot of the challenges I face were just the usual challenges that referees face. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, if anybody thinks that, you know, the journey from starting out to making it to the level that Sam's at or that I got to is an easy one, it ain't. It's a challenge all of the time, because you're in a competitive environment where the stakes are pretty high. You know, you're making decisions to the best of your ability, but as Sam said, the chances are in our line of work, you know, the acceptance rate is 50-50 quite often in some situations. So you've got to be really single-minded. You've got to be somebody who believes in yourself. You've got to have resilience. You've got to be prepared to bounce back from setbacks where you don't do as well as you'd hoped you would do. It doesn't always fall into place. Sometimes you'll be in a rich vein of form, just like a player, really. You'll see the ball really big, like a big beach ball. And then sometimes you'll see it like a little pea, and every decision is difficult. You have to work out a strategy to get through those difficult times, and, you know, leaning on people that you really trust, those people that are in your corner, that want you to do well, that puts things back into context. Mike Riley was great for me. He used to put my head on straight. If I had a difficult game, I'd go home, I'd throw my kit bag in the corner and think, that's it, this is too difficult, there's easier things to do. I'd be really down about it because it mattered, and then I'd phone Mike and he'd put my head back on straight. He was my colleague at the time, not my boss, but he was somebody who would just say, take a breath, calm down, and we'll put it into context and we'll take the learning from it. But I think at least 10 times I threw my bag into the kitchen corner after games from when I started, intending to not continue, but because I've got a passion for the game and supported by good people, I've gone back and picked the bag up again and cleaned my boots and gone out again. And you know, when you do get those promotions, you get those big assignments, you're so glad that you picked the bag back up again and went out and refereed, because if you don't, then you're watching at home with everybody else. So don't expect it to be a straight line of success. Expect the ups and the downs. That's really normal. Expect difficult games, expect challenging times. Keep that self-belief and find some real good support structure who, you know, people who can really help you put your head back on straight and put things back into context so you can go out there, you know, feeling confident again the next time.
Howard, how do you deal with those difficult games, those matches where you made decisions and you think, I got that wrong, that wasn't right? How do you deal with that? Because mentally, it must be a real challenge.
It is. It's probably one of the most challenging things to do, I think, knowing, you know, in the game that, or at least sensing that you've made a mistake. My dad, I mentioned him earlier, and he would go with me to a lot of my games, and he could read my body language. He could tell if you know, a situation happened that I had some doubt about, and my shoulders would drop a little bit, and he could almost tell from the body language I was running back through my head and thinking, oh my goodness, I hope that's not a mistake. And I did looking back, I spent a lot of time wasting energy, mental energy, on situations that I suspected were mistakes at the time, but maybe weren't when I watched them back. And also, I used to try to put things into context. You know, understanding that mistakes will happen is important. Understanding that, you know, nobody's going to be perfect. The only way you're not going to make a mistake is not to go out there and do it at all. So that's not something that was an option. You know, if you've got a passion and a love for it and you want to be out there doing it, striving for the next thing, then you're going to make mistakes. And also, mistakes very rarely have a real significant impact on you as an official. They come and they go. You learn from them. You try to reduce the number of mistakes that you make through, you know, education, through, you know, conversation, through self-analysis and all that sort of thing. So you try to minimize them. But generally speaking, they don't make a mistake doesn't impact your progress to the top. Sam will say the same thing, I'm sure. You know, we've all made mistakes in our careers, and it's, you know, it's something that you kind of have to live with. But, you know, generally speaking, you can easily get through to a good level, learning as you go, and just put things into context. I think that's important.
Sam, did some of those points there that Howard made resonate with you, because you've been recently promoted to the EFL, so you've jumped up through the non-league pyramid into the EFL pyramid now, and obviously the pressures, the decisions, everything seems to take a step forward in terms of the pressure for you as a referee.
Yeah, 100%. I think if I had a cat, the amount of times I would have kicked the cat, I would have had hundreds of them. But lucky enough, I don't. I think in regards to support networks, I think we have something, you could call it supervision. So if you've got a coach, you can talk to your coach, you can air things with him straight after the game. I think as individuals, you do a lot of self-analysis and reflection in action, and obviously outside the game as well. And for me, I'm probably my biggest critic. And sometimes it's not necessarily healthy, because when you believe that you're behind the curve, because you've got aspirations of getting as high as you can, you sort of beat yourself up more than you probably should. But because you think that you've got limited time to be successful, it's like a double-headed sword. So I think for me, having that network, similar to what Howard said, of people you can trust to get that information about what to take on board, what to learn the process about why, not necessarily the decision that you got wrong, but why you got it wrong. And again, I think my missus is very grounded, and she keeps me humble and puts things into perspective. And I think, again, with my job and that as well, I think being in the fire service, I think sometimes it puts things into perspective, into life and death. Not saying that you don't care about the decisions you make, but I think you also have to be able to rationalize that you're officiating a game that means a lot to a lot of people, but you can only do 100% and you can only do your best. And if you know you've done that, you can't really have many regrets. And it's about learning and moving forward and being able to park those decisions in order to get back out there and being brave and having that resilience to get the next decision right.
Sam, can you remember your first EFL game this season and what it was like, and the emotions that are charging through your veins as you get ready to go onto that pitch and blow the whistle?
Do you know what? I do, but I think the first game I had was in the trophy, and it was Exeter against Forest Green, and I was a bit like a rabbit in a headlight because I was so excited, but I'm quite calm and quite collective, but I could just tell that, like, you know, when like you're a swan and it's going like anything under the water. But then my first EFL game was at Port Vale against Crawley, and they told me it was the Wembley of the North. The pitch was massive. It was wide. And you know, when you got that nervous energy and you got that adrenaline, I remember when I used to play and I wanted to do really well, I was trying to suppress that nervous energy. And I had Mike Jones watching. So obviously he's in charge of us. So it was a case of, I need a good performance. It's my first EFL game. And don't get me wrong, there was some mistakes that I made in the game, but none that were drastic, that had an impact on a game. And like I said, it's about those stepping stones, those building blocks, about improving and making sure that every game is a lesson learned. And obviously, hopefully, you can just keep learning and moving forward. But it went okay.
That's the main thing. That's the main thing. From Port Vale to the World Cup final, you had the opportunity to referee the most prestigious game in football. Can you remember how you found out that you were going to be the referee of the final? Can you remember the emotions you felt, and talk us through that process, because it must be one of those kind of real pinch yourself moments.
Yeah, it was, Mark. I mean, so you know, looking back to 2010 and looking back to those days just before the final, we got to know about it on the Thursday. The game was played on the Sunday. We got to know about it on the Thursday. It was announced at 6 p.m. by FIFA who was going to do the final. And looking back now, those 3 days, I have no idea how I got through those 3 days. You know, it's like thinking that this game is coming up with, you know, the biggest sort of like TV audience you could possibly face in sport, I guess. Everybody that knows me, everybody that I care about, everybody that I want to make proud is going to be watching this game, and it's going to be consequential for the careers of me, my assistants, Darren and Mike, and all the players. And so much pressure on your shoulders. But I was down there in South Africa for 6 weeks. We were pretty much in that kind of zone. We'd done well. We went down there not expecting to get the final. You know, we'd done the Champions League final that year, which was a great honour. It was the first time that English teams had not made the Champions League final for quite some years. So here was an opportunity for an English official to do the final. The game was Inter Milan and Bayern Munich, and we were assigned to that final. That was fantastic. I thought it's a really nice opportunity to not only do the Champions League final, but also to go down to South Africa for the World Cup in a really good place. And the game went well down in Madrid. So we went down there in good form. I had a great team with me. Never underestimate the importance of the team in officiating. The biggest stroke of fortune I had in refereeing was that my birth date kind of coincided with that of Mike Malarkey and Darren Cann. You know, the fact that we were all of a similar age, we were, the same generation, and in my opinion, still the greatest assistant referees that have ever graced the field. Unbelievably good at what they did. Made me look good when I wasn't sure. I looked really calm, and yes, I know what I'm doing. It's quite a bit of the time the guys were giving me some information over the earpiece about what they'd seen, and I trusted them so much that I was really prepared to act upon the information that they gave me. We had a couple of good games in the group stage, a round of 16 game that went well as well in Johannesburg. So I knew we were building up a possible chance of a later stage game. A few referees made errors as well. There was no VAR back then, so we saw some no goal line technology. So we saw some errors that were impactful on game outcomes, and officials were sent home fairly early. Some really quality, experienced officials who would have been in the mix for the later games were sent home, and therefore this path was opening up. And then the semi-finals were announced. We didn't get a semi-final. After the semi-finals, the day after they brought us all together, the 9 referee teams that were still down in the referee camp. Originally there was 30, so it was a bit like Big Brother. You were getting evicted as you went, and there was 9 referee groups left. And FIFA announced that match 64, the Netherlands against Spain, would be refereed by Webb England, and they were the 2 words which kind of changed my life. And it was put out over Sky Sports, and breaking news that we were going to get the final, and people saw that. Within moments of the announcement, my phone started to vibrate, and I had hundreds and hundreds of messages from people saying congratulations on reaching the final. People were so pleased to see that that there was an English representation on the final, and everybody that had played a part in my career celebrated in that success. And I answered every single message while I was down in South Africa, texting and emailing, and my phone bill when I was down there came to, I think, £3,000, but it was paid for by the PGMOL, so I just kept texting away. And then we had some briefings. We had some technical briefings, some psychological briefings, which were useful. And we felt confident. We did. I was in really good shape, physical shape, the best shape of my life, and also with a great team around me. And then I faced the hardest 2 hours of my life on the field. but still looking back, great memories of that summer. And again, to think about where it started back in Rotherham back in 1989, amazing things can really happen to pretty regular guys.
And just to confirm, the TV audience for that game was around 2 billion. So there was just a few eyes watching every single decision that you made. Sam, when you listen to Howard talk about that journey from Rotherham to the World Cup final, does it give you the appetite to perhaps follow in those footsteps and go, right, I'm going to referee? And knowing you as I do, you don't just want to referee in the EFL. You want to go to the very top and challenge yourself with the very best.
Of course you do, but obviously those boots are too big to fill. You have to have an aspiration and a drive to be as good as you can and get to whatever levels your ability allows you to. But for me, you do have to have that desire. You have to have that work ethic. You have to also be realistic. You've got to be respectful to your peers who you're competing with and against. And I think I don't hide it. I want to be a full-time match official in whatever capacity that is. I will try and work as hard as I can. I will try and look at what my blind spots are, my weaknesses are. I work hard. I control what I can control. And if, for example, I get close, which I'm quite close now, then I'm happy. But I can't just be content with where I am. As much as I appreciate how hard it is to get to this level, I've worked hard and I'll continue to work hard. And like you said, you never know what you don't know. So again, like I said, I totally appreciate the guys in the Select Group 1, Select Group 2, the EFL referees, the Step 1 referees. And I'm always a strong believer is you get in what you get out. And for me, all I can say is I work as hard as I can. And when you hear some of the stories that Howard's basically telling us about, it can only inspire you and make you hungry. And many people will never ever get there, but if there's still that glimmer of hope, then it's fantastic, isn't it? And I think Howard touched the nail on his head earlier on that you got one of the best seats in the house just refereeing Football League games or any game, especially in this current climate at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched upon it earlier on, Sam, that you're actually a firefighter and you do a lot of work with them on diversity as well. How much of your role as a firefighter does that help your role as a referee? And you touched upon it there, perhaps decision making.
Yeah, so I think being in the fire service and you see some traumatic things, but I think because you're joining the fire service, you've got an air of wanting to help people and wanting to make a difference in society and your communities that you serve. And to be a leader and to be able to gather information and think on your feet and use processes and gathering information and actions and having objectives, it helps being able to manage situations on the field of play. It also helps being able to put things into perspective. So if I'm in charge of an incident, I'll be looking at all the information I got. What is the situation? I'll be looking at what do I want to get out of it? How do I communicate this? What do I expect? What do I anticipate? And again, when you're on the field of play, you get lots of information. You're working as a team. You're trying to anticipate things before they happen to prevent things escalating and managing the game and all those expectations and trying to keep calm and collective. So there's lots of transferable skills both within refereeing and both in the fire service. And for me, they both complement each other very well. You touched upon obviously trying to have an influence in regards to diverse communities within the fire service as well. That is something that I'm passionate about. It's something that we're trying to make a difference within the fire service. So it's very complementary, both with what the PGMOL's directives are at the moment, the FA's directives, society's directives, what's going on in the fire service. So a lot of the work that I'm trying to do and other organisations seems to be all coming together. And if it helps society at the same time, it has to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Howard, you're currently head of referees in the USA. You're coming to us live now from New York, where when you look at the roster of referees there, it's actually quite diverse. What have the PRO done over there that perhaps the PGMOL can learn from in the UK? Because it seems to be a very different approach.
Yeah, obviously, being here in the US, it's a pretty diverse place to be anyway. We can do better for sure. And listen, some of the words that Mike spoke about at the very beginning, some of those resonate with us as well, and some of the work that we're still trying to do. But we've got quite a diverse roster for the MLS games, including as well a lot of female officials. We've had some good success around including our female officials in the professional level. I think last year we assigned 12 different officials to games in MLS, which is great. Some of that comes off the back of the success of the US women's national team as well, and I think just really trying to send that message as much as we can. And it's difficult in a big country like this, but to say this can be for anybody. This refereeing business, it's not for an exclusive little club. It can be for anybody. It's about you as a human being, as a person. Have you got the ability to understand people and understand the game? It's clear, isn't it, to see why Sam's been successful. He's got humility, he's got a humbleness, but he's got a confidence with that as well. Not an arrogance. That's not an attractive thing. Having some ego through confidence, but that humbleness, that humility, and then just getting out there into the states, into the regions, just trying to identify some of those people that are starting out, and then supporting them so that they feel like they belong, they feel like they're not isolated, and trying to get role models. I mean, Sam and lots and lots of different people can be really strong role models, so that kids looking up at games on TV will say, yeah, that's something that could be for me. We can still do better over here for sure. We're making progress, but I'm sure that we'll continue to work with the PGMOL as well on this, because some of the challenges are similar over here as well. But and it's a great initiative.
High praise there indeed, Sam, from Howard Webb. Something that you said earlier on, Sam, that sort of stood out with me. You said, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And clearly you're referring to a lack of black referees when you were embarking upon potentially a career of becoming an official. What can be done to inspire people from underrepresented groups to take on the challenge of being a referee?
I think it's twofold. I think the amount of work that you see that's happening within football. You've got the diversity code, you've got the PGMOL doing all their initiatives. If you look at this as in breaking barriers, this is one of many things that the PGMOL are doing. The FA are doing their bits and pieces, Sky are doing their bits, Kick It Out are doing their. So society is also changing in this current climate at the same time. But I think individuals from diverse backgrounds also have to take responsibility and also trust the system, because I was one who I didn't believe that I could be successful because I couldn't see it. And I am a strong advocate that visibility is key. You need role models. You need to be able to build that trust, and that it's not tokenistic in meritocracy or suppression or systemic and oppression, and it gets tiring. So when you see all these initiatives going on, you have to believe that it's being done for the right reason, and you have to be brave. And if you're brave and you are a leader and you work hard and you've got those resilience and you keep knocking that door and stuff like that, they are fundamental skills that will set you well in your journey for when things aren't going for you. Because there's times when it is tiring and things aren't necessarily going for you in the refereeing world, where you make mistakes and you beat yourself up, but that resilience and that hard work and that bounce back ability that you've acquired through your journey will help you in the long run. So I think it's twofold. It's both external work and what the organization's doing, which there is so much work, but then it's down to also individuals of being brave and saying, do you know what, if I didn't see it in the past or I didn't believe it, trust the system, trust your ability, pick the phone up, ask those awkward questions, be out there and just work hard tirelessly, and you will be rewarded. You will be rewarded. And if anything, what else are we supposed to do? You have to keep pushing, have to keep trying, because for me, my motivation is to be that beacon, because if I'm not doing it, who's doing it? So even if I don't want to do video conferences, whether I don't want to do this, I've got to do it to show hope for everybody else who looks like me, who wants to get to a certain level to break those barriers down. So I think it's twofold.
How important is it that football needs to change as much as it's about getting underrepresented groups, Sam, to engage with football?
Well, so I think it's quite difficult to expect people from represented groups to just go out there and trust the system, because historically there has been, we can't say racism hasn't existed in society over years, but what you can't do is say that's because I can't, because I believe that everybody has an opportunity, everybody has to be given a chance. And even if I believe that I wasn't getting to certain levels because of X, Y, and Z, I will still challenge it. I will still push. I will still drive. You have to trust. You have to start somewhere to believe that you can make a difference. So for me, again, it's twofold. I'd never be ignorant or arrogant to say that racism doesn't exist or meritocracy doesn't exist. But what you have to do, you have to believe in the system. You have to believe in the people who are telling you that we're making change and that they're going to be equal opportunities for all of us. We could all do more. Of course we could.
Howard, what can we learn from the way that referees work stateside? Is there anything that the PGMOL can look at, and from your experiences of being over there?
It's quite interesting, actually, Mark, because a lot of the models here are based around what happened in the early part of this century in England with the PGMOL. So the model that I'm working within here is pretty much aligned to what we see in the English game. And one of the things that we have, I guess, here is greater flexibility around some of the things that we can do, that we're not burdened by some of the tradition and history in the same way that that people are back home. So we can explore a little bit. And initially, when MLS started, it went full on as being something pushing the boundaries, and then they came back a little bit to show that the game is truly the game here. That's the important thing first and foremost, that it is it is actually down to the quality of the product on the field. And not around gimmicks, and very quickly they were pushed to one side, and we're seeing the game grow exponentially year on year. It's getting more and more significant in the sporting landscape here, but we're still miles behind in terms of the monster that the sport is in the UK, and that brings its own challenges. That history, that amount of emotion that it generates, mainly positive emotion, but not always, is a challenge that we don't face over here. There's a positivity around the growth of the game here. We're trying to get to the levels that we're seeing in the UK and in Europe in terms of the relevance and significance of the game, but that brings its own challenges as well. So we're enjoying growing the game here, and we've got some freedom to do so that isn't the case everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had so many questions that have been sent in advance of today's webinar. So we're going to go over to them now. I've exhausted my questions. I could listen to you both talk for hours on end, but I'm conscious of the time. We've had one question from Miri Dimitriou, who says, Sam, do you think it is feasible that a pathway for ex-footballers and even academy dropouts can be created for them to become referees at the highest level, which of course you can identify with having played the game yourself?
I think there's positives and negatives for both. I think in regards to credibility, I think just because you've played a certain level doesn't necessarily automatically make you entitled to jump certain steps within the pyramid, or doesn't necessarily qualify you to be a good match official. If personal point of view, I would say from my playing experience and coaching experience, from level 7 to probably level 4, I wouldn't necessarily say I was a great referee. I refereed through knowing the game a little bit, understanding the game, the positioning, talking to players, having that credibility of being an ex-player and selling decisions. I think as you start to get to the lower ends of the pyramid, so once you start getting to level 2B, 2A, you're starting to learn your trade. And what I don't think we could allow is, even though it's not my decision, is to allow ex-professional players to go in at a level where the impact of their decision and the consequences of those actions to the business of football be detrimental. And I think you also got to think about the credibility of your peers, of how would it bode well for other referees that have worked hard all their life to get to a certain level, and then you've got players who have just come in and had a head start to get in straight at a football league referee, or straight to step 1 referee, or in at level 3. So I think just as well it's not my decision, so I can pass that buck on to sort of Mike Riley or David Ellery or Neil Barry. So no, I think there's arguments both ways.
Yeah, we'll let them answer those questions. We have a question actually for you, Howard, from Mike Foster. Howard, you were the referee at the FA Cup tie between Spurs and Bolton in March 2012, when you abandoned the game after Bolton player Fabrice Mwamba suddenly collapsed on the pitch and, of course, nearly died. What are your recollections of that day, and what experience did that have on you in terms of a lasting experience? Because it was obviously such a traumatic occasion.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit today, haven't we, about putting things in context, when errors are made and what have you. And then Sam's work in the fire service, some of the things that he's exposed to. I came from a policing background, so some of the things that you would see in your day-to-day work, kind of put the world of soccer into some context. Still an important part of everybody's life and a big business, but not often life and death. But here we were at White Hart Lane, faced with something that was, and I can remember the way that the game developed. It was in the sort of like the late stages of the first half. The game was 1-1. Bolton had scored early. Tottenham had equalised, and we're pushing for another goal just before half time. Bolton was slowing the game down a little bit, trying to get to half time at 1-1, and the crowd were reacting to some of those tactics to slow the game down. And I remember giving a throw in to Bolton deep in the corner on the far side. I signalled with my left arm upfield for this Bolton throw, and as I turned my head left, I saw Fabrice on the floor, face down, with nobody around him. The closest player was Luka Modric, and he looked as kind of like bemused by it as I was feeling. And sometimes in refereeing, you get credit for things that you don't really do anything. And other times you make great decisions and people don't say, well done. I got a lot of credit for my part in that on that day. I did nothing, because when I looked at, it was obvious that there was something seriously wrong. But as I looked over to wave the physio on, or the doctor on, I realised he was already 15 or 20 yards onto the field, because he, in his professional wisdom, had recognised the seriousness of the situation and was running on at full speed to deal with it. But it wasn't as apparent to the fans. The fans didn't quite realise what was happening. They just saw that somebody had gone down, no reason why, and they started to react, booing, thinking it was some additional time-wasting tactic being employed. But then things unfolded. So then the physio was met by the doctor very quickly on the field, and Fabrice was put onto his back, and the doctor ripped his shirt open and then clasped his hands onto his chest and started to do CPR. And at that point, the stadium fell silent. And we all thought to ourselves, 40,000, 21 other players, me and my 2 assistants suddenly felt, oh my goodness, this young athlete is dying in front of us. And these poor medics, who are so skilled at what they do and have done lots of practice of CPR, no doubt, on these resuscianis that we used to deal with in the police. But here they are having to do this in front of 40,000 people. And unbelievable work that those guys did. And then thankfully there was some quick thinking on the day as well. One of the stewards allowed an off-duty doctor to, if he can be an off-duty doctor, to come onto the field. The cardiac specialist came on, he assisted. And then the players were coming up to me and saying, what do we do? And, I just said, okay, let's just stay calm. Let's just, find somewhere to give people space, to give the people doing the work space. In the end, Fabrice was carried off. We went into the locker room while we were working out what to do. I mean, it was fairly obvious that we weren't going to be able to play. I said to both Owen Coyle and Harry Redknapp, were the 2 coaches, I said, look, okay, take a minute, come back in 5 minutes, we'll talk again. And within 2 minutes, Harry knocked on the door and said, look, we can't play football today. My players are already in the shower. They've got no interest in playing football now. And thankfully, even though, we had 70 something minutes without a natural heartbeat, Fabrice was able to survive that ordeal. And I've met him a couple of times since. And it's quite clear that the expertise that was on hand that day, not my expertise, I did nothing. What the medical personnel did, and numerous other people played their part to get him away from the stadium in a safe way as quickly as possible to some additional expertise, saved his life. And it did put things into context. It changed my way that I looked about player safety, in terms of not taking a chance if a player goes down. Yes, we'll have the time on, guys, but let's look after the player safety first and foremost. Here in the US is a huge issue around concussion. I know that's a narrative that's growing everywhere in the world, in the UK as well. And I even went and spoke to a group of coaches on behalf of FIFA to talk about the dangers of feigning injury and how that could ultimately cost a player the chance of survival should there be a sudden cardiac arrest, because those first few seconds are so important. And if a player has been feigning injury, it might be seen as crying wolf. So, it put things in context. It changed my view on treatment of injuries for players and the need to always put that to the forefront of our minds as refs.
Wow, really incredible to listen to the story there. And luckily, like you say, Fabrice made a recovery from that game. Another question for you, Sam, and someone has said, what advice would you give to any young person thinking of becoming a referee? What's the first step that they should take?
I think they obviously need to contact their local referee and development officer within their county, and then get themselves onto a course. But I think it's like anything. I think you need to work hard, ask questions. Don't be scared to ask questions to anyone, even if it's your local referees that you know of. Get their contact numbers. Build a support network. Because there's a lot of peer support out there, and it will help. So I think for me, fundamentally, I think you've got to contact your RDO, contact your referee and support officers, friends, family, work hard and ask questions.
We've had another question in from Robert Herrett, who is a 4th season FA referee. This is a question, I guess, to both of you. What has been the hardest level to referee at? Does it get easier the more you go away from the grassroots football?
Howard, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay, Sam. Yeah, different levels for different reasons. I suppose always those initial few games are going to be the most challenging when when you're first doing something you've never done before. Like I said, I had this license to drive, but I never sat behind the wheel before. And I see a lot of young referees. They go out there. Some of the basic mechanics of refereeing are not so straightforward. Just understanding how to make the whistle speak for you. I mean, it's things that seem pretty obvious, but kids who go out refereeing, they'll be almost shy to blow the whistle. So in some cases, you learn so much in those early days. I would say while you're young enough and you've got the ability to do as many games as you can, my philosophy was always just accept as many games as you can, because you learn from every game. You learn from every situation in every game. You learn from the reaction of players. You learn from the reaction that you have yourself to a decision, and that all generates this gut feeling. This gut feeling that becomes so important later on when you're making decisions, because you can't always see everything. You can't, and if you only give a decision when you have 100% of the information and 100% certainty, then you're going to miss some important decisions. You have to have a decent level of certainty. You have to see a certain amount, but you've got to trust your gut feeling as well. And it serves you well. And you develop that in those early stages when you're first doing games. Getting through those first few weeks and months is not easy. There's challenges that you're facing for the first time, particularly if you're somebody of a younger age as well, where you're still developing your own personality. The colleague of mine from school who did the course with me back in 1989, he unfortunately suffered an assault in the second game that he did. And that was it. He did 2 games and I did 500. I mean, it just shows these sliding door moments can change your life. So getting through those early few months, less of that is happening all the time, of course. And then I think in terms of the step up, really, the one that really caught me out the most was moving on to the conference / the panel leagues. The conference was really pretty physical back in the late 90s. I had to adjust to the physicality of the league in terms of the challenges in that competition, but also what was the Pontins League, the football combination, that equivalent. It was so fast as well. And my first ever game in the old Pontins League, the reserve league, was Derby County versus Leicester City at the baseball ground, and my physical fitness was nowhere near what it needed to be. And that was a rude awakening within the first 10 minutes, because you can't be thinking about your lungs or your legs. You've got to be thinking about the decision that you need to make, getting from one penalty area to the other in the last minute of the game, being able to make a big call at one end and then a big call at the other a few seconds later, and not thinking about how you're going to get from one to the other, just thinking about where you need to position yourself, how are you going to get there to get the best angle, and then making the decision, and then selling the decision as well, because we have to be salesmen as refs, and we have to get the players to believe us. Sam looks like an athlete. The players know that he played. They know that he's got this empathy with the players, understanding of the game, and that helps him sell the decisions. I realized I had to change my physique as I came through, just so that I would be as credible as possible, so that the acceptance would come. But that was the level that really took me by surprise, the first real true professional level, and I wasn't a professional athlete and needed to be.
And luckily for you, a large chunk of your refereeing career, there was no social media, so people weren't analysing the decisions you were making. Sam, you've recently moved from non-league to the EFL. What's that transition been like, and how have you found the level?
Do you know what? I think touching on some of what Howard said is all I agree with. Having played, that experience of seeing too much, through the early stages, I saw too much, I think, and it wasn't until I sort of got to level 2B, 2A, which is now step 1, that I then realised that it is hard. For me, the transition from step 1 to Football League was probably the hardest level, I believe. I spent 4 years there, and I come through the system very, very quickly. But I think when you're refereeing 2 different styles of football, we were doing the Premier League under 23. So you had a lot more technical offences. It was a lot faster. The type of fouls that were committed were a lot more technical. It was knocking players off balance, and their technique was good. And where they were going to put the ball, you could anticipate it was going to go there because of their skill level. Whereas then when you were officiating on the National League, it was a bit more blood and guts, so it's a bit more competitive, and it felt like it meant more, and the consequences to get to the Football League. So your style and your approach to both 2 different contrasts had to be different. And the problem I had was my philosophy of how I believed football should be played from being an ex-player had a detriment to how I was refereeing the game, because I was always better doing the Premier League reserve games because I felt, oh yeah, that's where the ball's going to go. I'll enjoy this. I like this more. Whereas on the National League, where it was a bit more competitive and earning a right to play and blood and guts, I found it more difficult to stamp my authority on the game and put my head above the parapet and being out there, because I believe that referees weren't to be seen. So that was something that it took me a bit of time to adjust. So I would say from step one refereeing to the Football League was the biggest jump for me. And it's still something that I'm trying to learn now, being on the Football League, because you've got the contrast between League One and League Two. So you have to adapt your style in regards to the teams you're officiating. So it's something that obviously through the levels of officiating, you learn through experience and time.
And Sam, we've had another question in from Alex Howell, who says, why is there a lack of diversity in referees? Is that something you can easily answer?
It's $1 million question. If I knew it, obviously, hopefully I'd be able to fix it. But again, I think there's a multitude of reasons. And I think it is about having visibility, it's support, having role models, perceptions, the education, which obviously this is part of education, promoting all the good work that we do. Because again, in refereeing, I don't think we promote all the good work we do to the communities to show that we do want to make it more inclusive, and even promoting the role of a refereeing. I don't understand why we don't sell it better, because you remember they did some kind of event last year with Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, and I think they had the Select Group 1. That went down a treat in my community, and at work they were like, I didn't believe how good it was. I didn't believe you did it. I didn't believe that. More of that, of publicising what we do. I don't know whether I should be saying that, because it might mean that they've lost less more chance for us to progress. But again, selling the job of being in the front seat of the game. Can you imagine, like I said, for me, can you imagine being in the front seat where Howard was in the World Cup final or in the Premier League when you love football and you're passionate about it? Surely that's got to be everybody's dream to a certain extent, to be in that position. So I think we could do more with that.
We're running out of time. Last couple of questions. Howard, what would you have been like to referee if you were on the pitch?
Apart from not very talented, I think quite difficult. In fact, I played five-a-side on a Monday night here in New York. I did do until Corona came along. But yeah, and we after work we go up to this pitch on the East River, or next to the East River, and I was foul from behind, clearly foul from behind. Got wiped out, and the referee waved me up like this. I was furious. It was like, how can you possibly not give that? It was like the sense of injustice was raging through me, because it was such a clear foul, and I would have scored. So I think I would have been quite challenging, but reasonable as well. I mean, at the end of the day, those emotions would bubble up, but I've got the ability to calm them down. But I think I would be fairly vocal as well. Sam can actually tell you what he was like, because he was been there and done it, and lots of referees could tell you some stories about him. But yeah, I think I'd be pretty competitive, And by the way, Sam, if this year's tough, by the way, my first year on the Football League Middle, we used to get banned at A to F, F being the worst. And my letter came through at the end of the year. It said, your ban for season 2000-2001 is F. And I thought I was going to be in A or B. I even looked on the keyboard of the typewriter to see if F was near to B, and it was like a type. It wasn't. So don't despair if it's not perfect first year on the Football League.
No problem.
That you're getting angry at a referee as well, Howard. And Sam, what would you have been like to referee as a player?
I think I was quite sneaky. I think I tried to buy fouls, not fating injury, Howard. I think it was a case of trying to get the referee on my side, because I was quite quick. I wouldn't say I was that great of player, but I tried to initiate contacts and stuff like that. And those 50-50 ones, I thought if I could get the referee on my side, there's more chance of that humanistic side that he was going to give the foul to me than rather than against me. So I tried to use that kind of manipulation, I think, of match officials in my game.
Brilliant. Let's go for one final question for the both of you as we round up today's webinar. When you look at everything that is happening in the world of football, particularly the challenges with the pandemic and the push for a greater diversity in refereeing and football in boardrooms across the whole industry, really, how important is that, Howard, that we really diversify this game that we love so much?
I think it comes down to the fact that there's great people. There's great people everywhere, and we need them in our sport. And we cannot be exclusive. We cannot be restrictive as to who should be involved in this sport of ours. You know, it's something you know, Sam, we're all passionate about. It generates emotion in us. We care about it. It's the most important of the least important things in life after family and what have you. And we can't exclude good people. And there's a lot of good people all over the world from different backgrounds, and we need to embrace everybody. And if we don't, then we're missing out. We're missing out on good people in boardrooms, good people in the referee's locker room. We need to, as leaders, we need to. This is called breaking barriers. We need to break barriers down. We need to identify where they exist, why they exist, and what we can do to get rid of them, and then take some proper action. You know, and actually generate the opportunities for people to flourish, whatever their background. And we'll all benefit, because the game will be better officiated and better played and better managed and better coached and everything. It's just pretty obvious, isn't it? It's not easy to do, but it's obvious that we need to do it.
And Sam, the same question to you to summarise the importance of it, and for you right at the forefront of moving the PGMOL forward and being a black man refereeing games in the EFL. You must be immensely proud, but also you don't want to just be an isolated referee. You want to have people that look up to you, follow in your footsteps, and continue to push refereeing forward.
Absolutely. I think for me, just on a societal decision, I think it's just the right thing to do. I think we need to make sure that we reflect the communities that we serve, and there's a great representation across the board. And like I said, I think it's like anything. I use the analogy of it. You need lots of good ingredients to bake a good cake. And I think if you've got lots of diverse people within different areas within the game and throughout the game, it can only flourish. I think it's been proven that most industries are better the more diverse they are and the more effective and efficient they are. So I think just having that diverse workforce is both the right thing to do, and it'll also be productive. But there's so much good work going on, so long may it last. But we keep fighting, we keep pushing, we keep all the people with us, and hopefully the breaking barriers is one step also moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we're actually into added time. I think we're even into Fergie added time as well. So, we've got to stop it there. But once again, a huge thank you to Howard Webb for all your thoughts and insights. And of course, Sam Allison, currently refereeing in the EFL. I know that I've learned so much from both of you, and it's been genuinely inspiring and fun to listen to your stories and the journeys that you're both on at the moment. So big thank you to Howard and Sam. And of course, the good news is this isn't the last of the webinars from the PGMOL. Take a look at this. Next week, Thursday at 5 o'clock GMT, we have another awesome session planned. The focus will be on women refereeing, and we are delighted to share that Sian Massey Ellis and JJ Roble will be on the PGMOL special guests next week. If you haven't already, please do sign up for that one, and remember to spread the word. Put that in your diary now. Make sure you do it. And if you don't, Howard will personally be on the phone to question why not. And you don't want to mess with Howard Webb. Diversity won't happen overnight, of course, but it will happen. The PGMOL are determined to deliver here. And you can see just in the last hour or so their passion from the very top to make genuine change. I've taken so much from today. It's been an honor to speak to both Sam and Howard. And I know that they've probably had some things that would have really resonated with you. People that are inspiring to be referees, people that want to diversify the game that we love so much. The good news is that you will see some of the clips from today's session on social media. The PGMOL are setting up social media accounts as well, so they will be able to interact with fans in a positive manner. So look out on Twitter and Instagram over the course of the next few days and weeks as those get activated. So make sure you share them, tell everyone about what's happened today, tell everyone about the journeys that Sam and Howard have been on, and remember that as we all strive to make change in the game that we love so much, we need to work together to diversify the industry that we truly love. Goodbye.